Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna. Today we are reading Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 1, Text 16. Swayam Danu Dvari Nidaya Mayam. Swayam Danu Dvari Nidaya Mayam. Pratu Puromarma Sutaritopi. Pratu Puromarma Sutaritopi. Sa ittamat yulbana karnabanir. Sa ittamat yulbana karnabanir. Katavyato yadurmanayana. Katavyato yadurmanayana. Swayam Danurdvari Nidaya Mayam. Pratu Puromarma Sutaritopi. Sa ittamat yulbana karnabanir. Katavyato yadurbanayana. Swayam Danurdvari Nidaya Mayam. Pratu Puromarma Sutaritopi. Sa ittamat yulbana karnabanir. Katavyato yadurmanayana. Afterwards, Svayam, he himself, Tanuhutvari, bow on the door. Nidaya, keeping. Mayam, the external nature. Pratuhu, brothers. Puraha, from the palace. Marmasu, in the core of the heart. Taritaha, being afflicted. Api, in spite of. Saha, he, Vidura. Itam, like this. Atyulbana, severely. Karna, ear. Panahi, by the arrows. Katavyataha, without being sorry. Ayad, excited. Uru, great. Manayanaha, so thinking. Translation and purport by Sri Grace Abhayacharana Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Thus being pierced by arrows through his ears and afflicted to the core of his heart, Vidura placed his bow on the door and quit his brother's palace. He was not sorry, for he considered the acts of the external energy to be supreme. Purport. A pure devotee of the Lord is never perturbed by an awkward position created by the external energy of the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita 3.27 it is stated, Prakriti kriyamanani gune karamani sarvashaha ahankara vimudatma kartaham iti manyate. A conditioned soul is absorbed in material existence under the influence of different modes of external energy. Absorbed in the false ego, he thinks that he is doing everything by himself. The external energy of the Lord, the material nature, is fully under the control of the Supreme Lord, and the conditioned soul is fully under the grip of the external energy. Therefore, the conditioned soul is fully under the control of the law of the Lord. But due to illusion only, he thinks himself independent in his activities. Duryodhana was acting under such influence of the external nature, by which he would be vanquished at the ultimate end. He could not accept the sound advice of Vidura, but on the contrary, he insulted that great soul who was the well-wisher of his whole family. Vidura could understand this because he was a pure devotee of the Lord. In spite of being very strongly insulted by Duryodhana's words, Vidura could see that Duryodhana, under the influence of Maya, the external energy, was making progress on the path toward his own ruination. He therefore considered the acts of the external energy to be supreme, yet he also saw how the internal energy of the Lord helped him in that particular situation. A devotee is always in a renounced temperament, because the worldly attractions can never satisfy him. Vidura was never attracted by the royal palace of his brother. He was always ready to leave the place and devote himself completely to the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Now he got the opportunity by the grace of Duryodhana, and instead of being sorry at the strong words of insult, he thanked him from within, because it gave him the chance to live alone in a holy place and fully engage in the devotional service of the Lord. The word gata vyataha, without being sorry, is significant here because Vidura was relieved from the tribulations which trouble every man entangled in material activities. He therefore thought that there was no need to defend his brother with his bow, because his brother was meant for ruination. Thus he left the palace before Duryodhana could act. Maya, the supreme energy of the Lord, acted here both internally and externally. Om Jnanatimrandasya Gnananjana Shalakaya Chaksharon Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadate Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Parikamlam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamshta Shri Rupam Sagrachatam Sahakana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sachevam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parichana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Paran Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitamshta He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandha Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priya Ancha Kalpadarabhashta Kripa Sindhya Bhavacha Patitanam Pavanebhya Vaishnavebhya Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sarigora Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. So, we discussed a very interesting section of Srimad Bhagavatam, which as we especially Chris Radha Vinod Prabhu and Wednesday pointed out about in the first canto also we hear already about this pastime of how in particular there we hear how Vidura then returns again to deliver his elder brother to Dhritarashtra, and how he's also similarly very heavily preaches to Dhritarashtra at that time. But here we actually hear the story, what's happening before that, what led up to Vidura's leaving the palace in the first place. And so we heard in the last several verses how he was appealing to his elder brother Dhritarashtra to, finally, because that was at the point when the Battle of Kurukshetra was, about to be started, or like when it became very clear that there's no other way than war, when even Krishna himself being sent as a peaceful messenger to the Kauravas by the Pandavas, when even he got insulted and made it clear to them that yes, there's no other way other than war. So Vidura was still trying from his best from his side to avoid that, by preaching to Dhritarashtra about what he did his whole life actually, that to admit that this one son in particular of the 100 that he begot, Duryodhana, is bringing all ruination. So if he doesn't step back from supporting him, and rather support the rightful King Yudhishthira, who is religion personified. And then we heard how after he and one of the things he said, one of the reasons he told Dhritarashtra why he should in particular not be so attached to this wicked son Duryodhana, was that he explained, or rather Prabhupada explained in the purport then more elaborately, but that a son is meant for, in Vedic culture at least, for delivering the father or the parents by, and for that reason, like in Vedic culture, people go like especially to places like Gaya, where they offer oblations on behalf of their forefathers to the Lord Vishnu, of course, first, and then that this prasadam then should be is meant to be then offered to those forefathers in case if they fell down to a low position, then they would get purified from that and would be saved. But Duryodhana there uses the word Vidura uses there the word for Duryodhana, I think something like apatya matya, thinking to be your son. Prabhupada says in the word to word, but then in the purport he explains that a good son is called apatya, one who does not allow his father to fall down. So, but Vidura says apatya matya, thinking. You think he's such a son, a good son, someone who doesn't allow his father to fall down. But Prabhupada explains then the purport that don't have any hope for Duryodhana being a good son if you already know from the beginning that he is so envious of Krishna, who is the original Vishnu, the supreme personality of Godhead himself. So if he is envious of him, then how can he later on offer oblations to Lord Vishnu, to Lord Vishnu's lotus feet? So in that way he appeals to Dhritarashtra. He's this son, he can't do any good for you, he only brings ruination. And so after Duryodhana heard that, then of course he got infuriated and then blasphemed Vidura and told him like basically to leave immediately and ideally he's to not keep anything, to just, what did he say, like something like, and leave him with only his breath. Like he told like his soldiers there, or like the people who were in the palace at that time, toss him out of the palace immediately and leave him with only his breath. So he wanted, and he insulted in particular about like he said, who asked him to come here, this son of a kept mistress. That we know about, we heard about that yesterday in detail about Vidura's background, that he was born from a maidservant, not from the queen itself, and thus he is a kind of a mixed caste, not a pure kshatriya, considered in terms of the material consideration of the varnashram system. But of course we know Vidura, he's actually incarnation of Yamaraj, so he's a Mahajan, pure devotee of the Lord, so that's completely beyond those considerations. But so that's how Duryodhana insulted him, and as we hear now in today's verse, that Vidura, being a pure devotee, he didn't take personal insult of feeling morose or anything or retaliating, rather he saw it as the mercy of the Lord, and we hear in particular he saw that in two ways. In the verse it's explained that he was not sorry, for he considered the acts of the external energy to be supreme. And Prabhupada explains how in particular did he see the external energy working here, and that Prabhupada explains is that he saw that Duryodhana falls into the category of Prabhupada quotes here, Bhagavad Gita 3.27, Prakriti Kriyamanani. Kunai karmani sarvasha ahankarami mudama kartahamiti manyate. That he is such a conditioned soul, fully engrossed in the false ego of thinking himself to be the doer, but actually fully acting under the Lord's external energy. And the external energy we know works on the conditioned soul in those three features in the three modes of material nature. And so actually our activities, and if we are not surrendered to Krishna, but if we are acting as rebels under the external energy, then we are actually, like Prabhupada explains in another purport, that we become passive. As the real us is the spirit soul, and that Atma, that soul, is then just as like an observer. We are in a passive state. We think, we misidentify with the body, with the subtle and gross body, with the false ego, mind, intelligence, and gross body, and in that way we perceive that the soul, we pervade the body with consciousness. So we are present and we are conscious of the material body and of the material activities, but we are actually not in control of that, because the material body and everything that's acting under the three modes of material nature, under the external energy of the Lord, and thus we are actually not the doer. Or at least we are only a very small doer, as Krishna explains at the end of Bhagavad Gita, that there is 5 doers and we are only one of them. And so Vidura understood that Duryodhana is obviously falling into this category, because he is completely opposite of being surrendered to Krishna. He's extremely envious of Krishna and he even tried to arrest him, that when he then saw the universal form. And so knowing Duryodhana to be such a deluded soul, Vidura understood that because he's acting under this external energy, then it takes its natural way of that he will face the reactions of that. If you're acting on the material platform, then by impious activities, then you get impious results. You will suffer for that. And so he knew that he will, by acting like that, in that case by insulting Vidura so greatly, then he simply creates his own ruination, as Prabhupada explains here. And also further, in terms of, because in the verse we hear that Vidura, he not only left the palace, but he placed his bow on the door and quit his brother's palace. So he didn't, in other words, he showed immediately that, okay, I'm not going to be involved in any of those politics anymore, I'm not going to fight for anyone or something like that. And also in Prabhupada explains here that particularly what he showed by that is that there's no need to defend his brother, Dhritarashtra, with his bow, because his brother was meant for ruination. Because he saw that even at that time, then still Dhritarashtra did not challenge Duryodhana, defend Vidura, just as Duryodhana or anything. No, he was just looking on, so which like he did all the life before. So in that way, he also partook in these heinous acts of Duryodhana, and there was nothing from Vidura's side how he could, at that point at least, help Dhritarashtra, especially defend Dhritarashtra, like with his bow. On the material platform, there was nothing he can do. The only thing he could do, as we know, was then later, after the whole battle, after all those 100 sons of Dhritarashtra were killed, then when Vidura saw the opportunity that now he might be finally receptive for preaching to him to at least renounce all of that and engage in some form of self-realization in mystic yoga, as he did then. So that's how Vidura understood the Lord's external energy working here on both Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. And interestingly, Prabhupada explains here that not only did he understand how the Lord's external energy was working here, but at the same time, that's like one fascinating thing about the Lord's energies, that actually, even the external energy, it's also the Lord's energy, so in one sense there is no external energy, it's also originally everything from the Lord and acting under His direction, but it depends then on the other, on the souls, on the other jivas who then how their consciousness is, or like how they reciprocate with the Lord's energy, then whether it acts as, because it's the same energy, but whether it acts then as external energy or as internal energy, that depends. So you see here from someone like Duryodhana and Dhritarashtra who misuse the independence in acting against the Lord, then the external energy takes over. Whereas in the case of a pure devotee like Vidura, the internal energy acts. Because the internal energy simply directly facilitates the loving exchanges between the Lord and His devotees, as the devotional service. And so Prabhupada explains here, Vidura understood the internal energy to be acting here as creating this situation to make it as an incentive to have, in other words, to have a nice excuse for Vidura to leave behind all those politics. So many years he tried so hard to help in that way as an advisor to Dhritarashtra, for the welfare of, as we know, he was well-wisher of both, of Kauravas and of Pandavas, but it didn't work on that platform. And so the Lord's internal energy created this situation so that he would finally give that up and simply focus himself fully on his transcendental loving service to the Lord, which he did by going on pilgrimage, and then later, as we heard already here, like the chapter that we're reading now is called Questions by Vidura, and we know whom does he converse with in Bhagavatam. It's mainly then with Maitreya. Initially he meets Uddhava, but Uddhava then we know out of his humility redirects him to Maitreya. And so that's how Vidura recognized this situation as for his benefit, as the Lord's mercy. Even though, like, from a conditioned soul's point of view, it's quite inconceivable, because if someone would treat us like that, he was there with all good intentions, trying his best to help everyone, and as reward he got insulted so greatly, and even thrown out of the palace. So we would feel like so insulted and so angry, insecure, whatever. But it shows the greatness of a pure devotee that he can immediately see something like that as the mercy of the Lord, which shows that he is completely free from false ego. Because if you have false ego, then this false ego would be so much hurt by such words of Duryodhana, and then he wouldn't be. Then he himself would act under the external energy, and thinking himself the doer, as I have to retaliate, I have to bring my own justice or anything like that. But the devotee doesn't think like that. The devotee knows the Supreme Lord is always there, is always the controller, and all loving, all merciful to everyone. So there's no need for me to act as enforcing law on anyone, in terms of justice. But rather, he's able to see something like this as the mercy of the Lord, and thus take full advantage to intensify his devotional service to the Lord. And so that was for that pastime. We know similar is, there's so many examples in Shastra and in Bhagavatam itself of how devotees see apparent reversals for the benefit of their devotional service. But in particular, in terms of when someone got insulted, unfairly treated, and took that as an opportunity to then take up full devotional service. We know, of course, is the very famous example then one canto later of Dhruva Maharaj, who was only 5 years old, we know, and he was one of the two sons of Uttanapad, who was one of the two sons of Swayambhuva Manu, of the first Manu, the first great emperor of the whole earthly planetary system, Bhumandala, and the son of Lord Brahma himself. So, in other words, Dhruva Maharaj was then the great-grandson of Lord Brahma. So in a very exalted family and great heritage. But so what happened was that when he tried to get one day onto the lap of his father, of the king who was sitting on the throne, that the Lord Dhruva Maharaj's stepmother, the other wife of course, Uttanapad had two wives, Suruchi and Suniti, and so Suruchi, insulted Dhruva Maharaj greatly. She, in her great pride of knowing the king to be more attached to her than to the other wife, she told Dhruva Maharaj things like that if at all you want to ever climb on this throne, be able to do that, then you would have to take birth from my womb. And to be able to do that, it's only possible if you worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus by His mercy you may take birth in my womb, from my womb. So, we don't have much time for the pastime, but so the point is that Dhruva Maharaj, in that case, he, as a child, and as a Kshatriya child, he was not like on a platform like Vidura here. Rather, he was greatly insulted. But by the Lord's mercy, it was also used fully for his benefit, because the Lord understood Dhruva Maharaj's determination, and that he was actually ready to do anything to, in that case, actually to retaliate and get then a kingdom even greater than of his father, even Lord Brahma. So, thus the Lord sent Narad Muni then to Dhruva Maharaj when he was already in the forest. We know before that he then went back crying to his own mother, to Suniti, who pacified him, and then maybe just 2 minutes. What's in the other? About, I find, there's many, of course, in the pastime there's so many points which are very amazing. But what I found interesting also is about when Dhruva Maharaj runs to Mother Suniti for solace, and she had already heard the news from the people around the palace, that naturally what we would think that a mother would do, is she would simply